All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us and welcome to another live edition here of Guns and Gadgets, backed by popular demand. Today we have a special guest, one that's been requested quite a bit here in comments and emails. I will introduce him first, and then we'll tell you a little bit about what he does, and then we'll go into some of the craziness. So before we start this, you're going to hear a lot of bills specific to Massachusetts today, but I want you to know that 85 to 90% of these bills have been submitted in numerous states across the country. So these bills are in your state. Chances are, if you are in, I like to call them a slave state, the anti-gun states. So pay attention because these are in your states. So welcome, everybody, please. This is Jim Wallace. He's the executive director of the Gun Owners Action League here in Massachusetts. Jim, say hi to everybody.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on, Jared. It's, this is the lovely part of technology where we can sit here in our kitchen and have a conversation. This is great.
Let me make sure the feed is going. All right, we are good. Last week we had, YouTube gave us a little hiccup.
That's those NSA wiretaps. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, they're probably right there behind my window. So why don't you tell everybody about Gun Owners Action League and what you do and how they can get a hold of you to see or find out more.
Sure. Gun Owners Action League has been around since, 1974. It was actually created when there was a ballot question back then to ban the sale of handguns in Massachusetts and possession of handguns. And the crew that actually put the committee together to fight that then eventually set up Gun Owners Action League as a permanent entity. I've been working for Gun Owners Action League since the year 2000. Perhaps ironically, before that, I was a mailman. So I used to do a lot of volunteer work for the sporting community and actually launched a couple of investigations on government waste and abuse of sporting dollars. And it's how Gold noticed me. And in December of 2000, I dropped my mailbag and picked up my suit and tie and went to work for Gold as their lobbyist and eventually public speaker. And then in 2005, actually became their executive director when my predecessor retired. We kind of have a multi-prong approach, maybe a little bit different from most state associations. We're one of only, I think, 6 state associations in the country that have at least one full-time staffer. We have 4. We're pretty thin staff, other than me, but the staff itself is thin. So we have kind of a multi-prong approach. I do the administration. I do the day-to-day accounting, the running of the company, certainly with the great help of my chief of staff, Angie Fisher. I also do the lobbying, some of the public speaking. And John Green is more or less of our outside guy now. He's the director of education and training, and his job is just that. He goes around the state, appears at clubs, appears all kinds of different places. And firearms training was, for the longest time, his initial job until we actually launched a course, Mass Gun Law for Citizens, because the gun laws in Massachusetts are so convoluted that trying to peel through them is just so hard. So we actually have, I think John has a 4-hour course, 4.5-hour course now, and we simply can't run enough of them. So he's our eyes and ears out there. He also helps run range seminars and club seminars to help the clubs run better ranges and also run better administratively. There's a bunch of...
Oh, there you are. Okay. Hold on, Jim. There we go.
Sure.
You still there?
I saw
Can
that.
you hear me?
Yeah, I'm still here, yeah.
All right, looks like there was a hiccup in the signal. All right, we're here. We're still good.
That's all right. That was the FBI getting in. So we actually developed some courses, John did for the most part, on people said, okay, I've got my initial course, I got my license, but now what? I don't know what to do. So we actually started getting, and I won't call them advanced courses like combat courses, but it's like, intro to sporting rifle, intro to trap, intro to IDPA. So all these introductions, because people just don't want to walk into a gun club and say, hey, can you teach me how to do this? People are shy about doing that. So we have a ton of that stuff. Mike Sweeney is our communications guy. Everything from the print newspaper that we still put out to social media, to the website, which we just totally re-engineered. We still have some hiccups in that, but we're trying to be more e-friendly. We're probably, as far as state associations go, the most e-friendly organization out there. We're kind of leading the way in that. So we're trying to be more online, and I know some people are frustrated because we have that mix of people that are have no idea how to run a computer to everybody that doesn't even want to run a computer. They want everything on their phone. So you have that huge spectrum of people that you have to try to work with, and it's fine. So that's pretty much what we do. I know a lot of people ask, well, why don't you file lawsuits all the time? And we decided a long time ago we were not going to be a litigation organization. That is really a specialty, and that's why Com2A, thankfully, has filled that void. But you really have to specialize in that stuff because it takes up all of your time and all of your money. I mean, a lot of people, and we're involved, and we can talk about this later, but we're involved in a lawsuit against Maura Healey that's hopefully going to be heard before the Supreme Court of the United States. A single case going before the United States Supreme Court can take up to 4 years and cost well over $1 million.
Right.
So if you're going to do that on a constant basis, that needs to be your sole priority.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize how much actually goes into a lawsuit until they have to defend themselves in court.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the Supreme Court, too, is you can work for 3-4 years to get a case there. They don't have to take it. They can literally just say, no, we're not interested.
Yeah.
So you've spent all that time and money for nothing.
So before we get going, I want to thank everybody who's shooting away like crazy on the comments. I'm the only cat working here today, so it's going to be tough to keep up. But I do see Chris Kenmatsu did a super chat. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And for anybody out there, if you're interested in what's going down, whether you live here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or another state that is currently under attack by the gun control lobby, you are going to want to pay attention to this at this little meeting here we're having. So there's a big meeting coming up on Wednesday, the 28th. They've already changed the time. It's now 10 a.m. if I'm correct. Why don't you tell the folks what the meeting is, what they can expect, and how they can go to it?
Sure. It's actually a public hearing before the Joint Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security. And those committees are made up of 17 members. There's 11 members of the House and 6 members of the Senate. And they will convene a public hearing with a list of bills, which we have. And I'm sure you can go up on the GOAL website. We've had it on social media. It's quite an extensive list of bills, both pro and con. You can certainly attend the hearing. You're invited to speak at the hearing if you want on a particular bill or maybe 1 or 2 bills. You are usually limited to 3 minutes of oral testimony, so just be prepared for that. They also really don't like when people get up and read testimony. And I know it's tough because most people aren't used to doing this, especially in front of legislators. But what they want to hear is personal stories. You can talk about the technicalities or, the legalities or the constitutionalities, but they want to hear your personal story. That's what really affects them the most. Don't try to debate. This isn't a debate. You don't get to ask them questions, which a lot of people don't realize. They think they can go there and question people. That's not how this works. They're here just to listen to you. If you have a technical question maybe about how something works as far as legislation, maybe they'll answer that. But other than that, they're not there to debate you. So I have no idea how this one's going to be, particularly because this is a very rare August public hearing because this is the month where the legislature is on vacation. They take the whole month of August off, so people are traveling and doing whatever. So I'm not exactly sure how this is going to work out, how many people are going to be there. I'll certainly be there doing my thing, and usually what I do is I talk to the chairs ahead of time, and normally what they want me to do is get up and just cover, a few bills that are priorities one way or the other, and then I'll leave so I don't sit there all day and waste people's time, because there's usually a lot of public that are there one way or the other, whether they're pro or con, and they want to have their say. I see these people all the time, so it's not imperative for me to be there and talk to them constantly on that particular day. I'll see them later in their offices and the hallways, and that's where I get my job done.
So would you say that it's beneficial for folks who are pro-gun to show up and testify? Because we know the pink shirts will be out there. We know the Moms Demand Action will be out there.
Yep.
Would you recommend that folks, if they're available? Of course, they hold this, like Liberty Doll in the chat said. Hello, my friend. They always hold this when normal people are working, which makes it difficult for the average gun owner to show up. But would you suggest people show if they can?
Yeah, if they can. It's very important. One of the things, I mean, I'm up at the State House a lot, but one of the things the legislatures don't see is lawful gun owners up there a lot, just wandering the halls. I have to hand it to the moms in the last couple of years. Almost every time I went up to the State House, there was a half a dozen or a dozen of them walking the halls, pushing their agenda. So most of them are retired. Whether they have something else to do or not, I can't say. But it's one of the things that our people don't really get involved in. It's hard, I know, because we're all working. You're all working. I know I do this for a living, so it's different. But this is also your liberty. And if you have a day, even if it's just a couple of you, go to the State House. And if you can't go to the State House, usually on Fridays, there's local office days for legislators. So grab a couple of friends, grab some coffee, go down, have a chat, and they'll be more than willing to sit down with you. Most of them will take meetings with all of their constituents. So it's very important to show a face. And I don't want to tease anybody because we're doing this now, but you can't just do this behind a keyboard. You got to get out there. You got to get face to face with them. And it's also important, and I've said this for years, because if you get to know a legislator personally, whether you're what's the old Joe the plumber or whatever, but if you get to know them personally, it makes it harder for them to vote against you. But if you're just a name on a keyboard, they're not so invested in what's going on. So it's very important to get to know your legislator by their first name. So when you call, be rational, be reasonable, be an adult. The worst thing you can do is start threatening people and thumping your chest, because then they go to the media and say, see, these gun owners are threatening us. And that happened last year. One of the state reps supposedly got some threats via email. Right. And the next thing you know, I'm on the news because she's pointing at me and blaming me. So, that's just the total opposite way to go.
Right. And we are a red flag state, so don't go to a meeting with your senator, your state rep, and get red flagged, please. I want to say hi to Fred Hill real quick and Malabanius. I'm trying not to torture any names. Thank you, everybody, for the super chats. It helps out the channel a lot. Blake Libby, thank you. I always tell people, Jim, that I prefer the face-to-face, because not only does it give them a name to the person they're talking with, but it's also better with accountability. Like I get along with my state senator, Ryan Fatman, and my state rep, Joe, and I'll keep him off the air because we're going to go shooting hopefully soon. So it's better when you can build that relationship, because it's like when I call them, I have their numbers. It's easier to get the answers to the question instead of busting around the bush or sending emails to the office. Do you find that the in-person stuff works better for us, where we're all on the same side of the Second Amendment? Do you think the in-person meetings, if they go to the State House and get some office time, or even in their local times, is that better?
1,000%. And even not just the legislators, but if you get to know their staff, if you call and leave a message, hey Jared, how you doing? Oh, sure, I'll let Ryan know you called, and
right.
you get that personal touch. But also, if you're reasonable and rational and you've had good conversations, one of the things they will also do is, if a bill comes their way, they may call you and say, hey, Jared, what do you think about this? I've talked to Jim about it. I've talked to whoever about it. But, I want to get your input. What do you think about this? And that's being an adult. That's being rational and approachable. Because if you're not approachable, you'll never get that opportunity if something goes on. On the other hand, too, it's a golden opportunity for me if people contact their legislators and say, hey, Joe, I'm really concerned about this bill, and maybe the legislature doesn't know about it. That's an opportunity for me, because the next time they see me in the State House, they said, hey, Jim, Jared just called me about something. You around in a half hour or so? Can you stop by the office and explain this to me? Golden. That's where I get my opportunity to talk to them about it. Where maybe I don't all the time. So It's kind of funny because a lot of people think that when I go to the State House, I always have like a whole schedule of appointments and I'm seeing this person and this person. Some of my more successful days in the State House are just simply being there when they're there, because they see you, they ask questions, they have casual conversations, and just like I said, hey, Jared just called me about something. Absolutely, absolutely. So those are the perfect golden opportunities for education.
Right.
Where we're having a problem, Jared, is that there are a few gun owners left in the State House. But we were discussing this with Fish and Wildlife folks the other day, because we do a lot of work with them too, is there's not a single hunter left in that building. 200 legislators, there's not a single one that spends time in the woods hunting and harvesting animals. That's a huge problem, because when you're starting to talk about those issues, not just strictly Second Amendment, but Fish and Wildlife issues, there's no connection. They have no connection to the outdoors. And Jared, if you don't mind, I'll explain just for a second too, because a lot of people,
go ahead.
Why does Gold spend any time on fish and wildlife issues? Well, a lot of people don't know, but anytime we buy new guns or ammunition, there's an 11% excise tax at the federal level, and that money goes to the federal fund that then gets divvied up in some kind of magical formula that goes to all the state fish and wildlife funds. And that money has to be kept in a special dedicated fund just for wildlife management. So we're involved in that pretty heavily and always have been, because it's our money. And we want to make sure that it's used correctly, that it's not some political hack that just needed a job to sit in an office somewhere, that they're using the money to do what they're supposed to do. So if anybody ever has any questions about, well, I don't care about hunting here, it's a Second Amendment. Well, yeah, that's true, but your money's going there, so we're trying to protect your money.
Yeah, it's a good point. A lot of people don't understand that, so I'm glad you brought that part up. So let's jump into it a little bit. I won't bore. Yeah, I know. I won't bore everybody with going over each and every one in detail, because a lot of them are duplicitous, if I'm saying that right. They're the same. So the ones that are submitted in the House, there are mirrors in the Senate. But there are 68 bills that they want to talk about. 46 in the House, and if my math is correct, that would leave 22 in the Senate. So we'll touch on some of the ones first that Goal is supporting. Then you can dive into some of the ones if you want to get specific on, and then we'll go into some of the ones that everybody needs to pay attention to, because they are in those typical anti-gun states. So what you're seeing here, what happens in Massachusetts and New York and California, they trickle, guys. So all right, let's run down this. So we have some of the good ones that we're supporting on your side. There is H-2054, which would allow companies outside of Massachusetts to ship ammo to properly licensed residents, which we can do. You know who caused a stir and ruined it for some companies, but she has kind of stepped back a little bit, and companies are resuming, not all of them, but that would be nice to have that taken care of finally.
That includes components too, and that actually started with former Attorney General Tom Riley.
Yep. And
it was kind of stupid, because he did a sting operation and spent all this money hiring undercover investigators to see if they could order ammunition and components in the state. And we laughed when he held his press conference and we held a sting operation. It's like, well, you could have just asked. Yeah. We've been doing it for 50 years, so what's the problem now, or whatever. How many years were we doing it?
They just don't get it, though. Sometimes they're in, their heads in the sand on a lot of these people. So H-2050 will attempt to make LTCs for Massachusetts as a license to carry valid for life, and removes all fees and licensing. Yes, don't know if the state will ever give up that cash flow, even though there's a Supreme Court case says they can't charge for a constitutional right, but that's a different video. 1395 refunds application fees if license is not issued within 40 days. You want to touch on that real quick? Tell everybody in the state, because I hear it a lot, what the law is as far as the turnaround. And CJIS, right now CJIS is doing good. They're like 6 weeks or so, but I've seen times where it's longer. So maybe touch on that, Bill, a little bit.
Yeah, the licensing thing has been a problem since I've worked for Goal anyway. And it was real bad back in, I want to say, the mid-2000s, where there was actually almost a year and a half waiting time to get your license renewed. And other than chief's discretion was one of the biggest complaints that legislators got, period, not just on gun issues, but on all issues. So back in 2014, we actually, in that huge bill that got passed, we were able to get in the law that as long as you had applied for your license prior to its expiration date, it would be valid until they got to you. We thought we were fixing a problem by doing that. Maybe not, because now they say, well, there's no rush. Your license is valid. No problem. But that's only for people who already had their license.
Right.
People who are trying to apply for a new one are waiting 6 months to a year to get their applications processed. So it does still say in the law that they're supposed to issue within 40 days, but there is that caveat that your license is valid as long as you applied. The problem with a lot of this, Jared, even the 40-day thing before we put that fix in, there's never any punishment if they don't do what they're supposed to do. I mean, you can spend the money, take them to court, and all the judge is going to say is issue the darn license. But nobody ever gets punished for not following the law in government,
right.
Especially on the lower levels.
Well, we'll see if that works.
Yeah.
We'll see. 2055, I know this is one you wanted to touch on the House side. So the easy way to understand this, ladies and gentlemen, listen out there, this would look to make fees for firearm storage illegal if stored without the express written consent of the owner. We have in Massachusetts bonded warehouses where if, for whatever the scenario is, your firearms are taken away from you and the police department doesn't have the room to store them, or they're held in a period of time in which they can't keep them, they can give them for safe storage in a bonded warehouse. And I'll let you tell about the debacle that causes.
Yeah, it's a huge problem because, number one, there's a wink and a nod agreement between a lot of these police stations and the bonded warehouses that as soon as your firearms are surrendered, and that's a key word, believe it or not, Jared, surrendered, because a lot of people think, well, if your license is temporarily suspended, they can come into your house and confiscate your guns. No, they can't.
Nope.
It's on you to surrender them. A letter that says your license is suspended is not a search warrant, and that's very important for people to understand, because if you let them in the house, then anything they see that might not be right, they can then charge you for. Right. It's your job to surrender your guns to them, so bring your guns to them, make arrangements. But once your guns are surrendered, they often will just give them to these bonded warehouses. Now they're put on the bonded warehouses bound books, which is, every FFL, whether you're a gunsmith or a retailer, they all have to have bound books. Same thing with these bonded warehouses. And once they're on their books, you start accruing fees right away. And they're not just, 30 cents a day to store something. It's, we had to go pick them up, so that's a fee. We had to put them on a book, so that's another fee. We charge daily fees for storage, and we charge fees for maintenance. So before you even know where your property is, you're in debt to a private company that you did not give permission to. The other problem is there's a lot of guns that we can legally own that retailers cannot transfer to us, right, whether it's because of statute or regulation. And a lot of that's handguns, but now after what Maura Healey did in 2016, that complicates matters with a lot of long guns. So if your property gets logged into their books, they can't legally transfer them back to you. So part of this particular bill, says that's pretty much ridiculous. It's your property. You should be able to get it back. The other piece is the fees, and it doesn't allow for fees to be charged unless you have given strict written consent to have them stored, because you can have them stored with anybody who's licensed.
Right.
Doesn't have to go to a bonded warehouse. So a lot of people don't know their rights, and that's why we actually wrote up, I think we put it in the last newspaper of Goal, we actually drafted a letter that people should keep in their gun safe that has instructions should something weird happen. This is what I'm telling you to do with my property. I do not consent to have it stored anywhere else where I'll be charged fees.
Yeah, that's a smart idea.
It's an important property rights thing, and everybody says it'll never happen to me, but trust me, it happens. Because actually, Jared, one of the more common ways that people get tangled up is 911 calls for emergency medical help, because the first person through the door is a police officer. I know, I've had to use it for myself. I'm a heart patient, so first person through the door is always a police officer. And if they see something that's not right, maybe you were cleaning a gun or there's a gun on a countertop, it's improperly stored, bam. That's where a lot of these happen before people even realize what's going on.
Right, and I know of a case right now that's in litigation. I won't mention the town or the PD, but a gentleman was in his home cleaning guns after a range session and had a seizure. Seizures don't usually say, hey, I'm going to hit you in about an hour and a half, please prepare.
Right.
So when EMTs and the police show up, he had 2 handguns on the table. He was on the floor coming out of his seizure. They hammered him with unsecured firearms. So absolute BS, but they did it, and they shouldn't have, and they should be held accountable for that. But that's actually stuff that does happen. Not just here, it happens in other states too. Before I go to the next one, I want to give a shout out to GuardDog39, who says this is awesome, and he bought some of my shirts, and they're great. So follow what he did and buy some of my shirts. You can get them on my they're linked in every description. You can find those. Thank you, everybody who is here. I just wanted to let everybody know we are talking with Jim Wallace, who's the Executive Director of Gun Owners Action League here in Massachusetts, of which I am a life member. If you like these type of live feeds, I need to know that. This is like the 5th or 6th one I've done with prominent Pro 2A entities and people across the country. And if you want to keep this going, let me know. Let me know, and subscribe to the channel so that you can be kept up to what's going on here. So the next one we'll get into, that's a decent one, is 1404 on the Senate side, prohibits confiscation of guns or ammo during state of emergencies here in Massachusetts. We've seen that happen in a former state, my old home where I used to live, Louisiana. New Orleans did that after Katrina. I guess so much for oaths, but do you foresee that getting any support at all?
The interesting thing is that's been around, as you said, ever since Katrina. Well, I'm going back let's put it this way. It was long enough where Mitt Romney was still governor. We actually had this bill passed by the House, the Senate, and it was on its way to the governor's desk on the very last day of the legislative session. And as it was going to the governor's desk, that's the first time law enforcement stood up and complained about the bill, and the bill died. So we went through the entire process, had it ready to be signed, and that's when they lodged a protest against the particular legislation. So, who knows? It's one of those things that is an old idea and should have been done a long time ago. But it's when you can't even count on sometimes your law enforcement friends to help you out with things, and they come out at the last minute and sabotage you. Well, it is what it is.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. I mean, my oath means something to me, and the more good people out there with guns, especially when shit hits the fan, it's always a good thing. Let's see, but Texas just did that. They just passed it, although it was modified when it got to the governor's desk. Let's see. How about S1413 allows possession of a shotgun by 12 to 17-year-olds on special youth hunts under supervision of FID and LTC holders. I'm glad to see this because it is something that has been slowly but surely pushed out of every single state of the union, is the ability to take our kids and teach them to shoot or hunt in controlled events. And with the climate out there now, you might think you have a better chance at winning the lottery. But this is something that our society as a whole could benefit from. What do you think?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. This bill was filed by Senator Ann Goby, and it is specifically for youth hunts, because one of the problems we have, and we've addressed it to some extent, is that as soon as you're 15 years old and you're hunting, you have to have an FID. So right. You could literally be halfway through hunting season, turn 15, and now you don't have an FID. Now you lose the rest of your hunting season. So a few years ago, we were lucky enough to have Senator Brewer, who is a great friend of the sportsmen and women and gun owners, and he's retired now. But he always used to say right on the Senate floor, you show me a kid that fishes and hunts, I'll show you a kid that isn't on the corner doing drugs or getting in trouble. So he'd do anything. So we did a couple of things he did for us when he was still in. One was to drop the FID fee for juniors. So if you're under 18, instead of paying $100, your FID is $25. So that was a phenomenal thing, because especially if you got 3 kids, you're trying to make ends meet, you all hunt. I mean, by the time you get your gun licenses and your hunting licenses, it's just one thing after another. The other problem was what I mentioned earlier, was could be halfway through a hunting season and now you're 15 and you can't get your FID because it's going to take 6 months. So what we did in 2014, and part of that big bill, was you can actually, as long as you have all your courses, whatever you need, you can apply for your FID at 14. So as soon as you turn 15, you can go down the station and they can just hand you your card. So all that stuff can be already in the works and ready to go. So, but this is just one more step that helps us out with that as well.
Good. Let's see. Another one to reduce the... So this is one that is interesting. So 1424. So those people who don't live in Massachusetts and want a non-resident LTC here, you get raped for $100 a year. This bill looks to make it $40 valid for 6 years, which would put it right in line with the length of our license, except much lower than we pay currently for $100 here in the state. I'd like to see that one take place, but again, CJIS and the state giving up that $100 a year. I don't know if that'll happen, but that's a good one. Who filed that one?
That was Senator Mike Moore, and that's the problem, is it's money. And that's the discussion I had a few years ago with House Speaker Robert DeLeo when we were meeting about a bunch of stuff. And one of the things I said was, the state collects millions of dollars in license fees every year, which to me is unconstitutional anyway. We shouldn't have to have a license. Again, that's a whole other show. But you collect anywhere between, I think it's $2 and $3 million a year for license fees in Massachusetts for gun owners. And what do we get for it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They don't help in training, which probably we're glad they don't, because they would mess it up somehow. Look at the big dig, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
It started as $2 billion, ended up $21 billion. But and so as a result, and this is a good example for some of these bills that we'll talk about later about requiring things. What the speaker did was, at least to start things, was to mandate the state police do public service announcements on safe storage, because a lot of people still don't know about the safe storage laws, and they get bound up with them, and also how the importance of firearms training and how to obtain it. So that law was passed in 2014, and guess what? They haven't done a single PSA. The law hasn't been followed. So once again, we're in a position where millions of dollars of our money is collected, and we get nothing in return for it. I did make, and I got to put myself in the blame of this. It was a number of years ago. We actually said, hey, why don't we take $1 from every license that's charged, and we'll give it to the Gold Foundation for training. Yep, that was a mistake. Totally admit it. Boy, our members hated that. And it's like, well, you're going to be taking money from the government. Oh, yeah, okay, that wasn't my intent, but I get the argument, so we pulled the bill. So the intent was just trying to get some money back to what we were trying to accomplish. But so yeah, it's good.
All right. One I would love to see happen, but Healy would have to give up some of her power here. 1421 on the Senate side would remove her ability, not just her, but anybody in the office, to regulate firearms under 93A, which is a consumer protection law, and repeals existing regulations. So for those who are watching or saying, what is that gibberish? That's the reason you can't buy a Glock in the state of Massachusetts. Even though they're on the approved roster, they're on her secret list that you'll never see because it's the consumer protection. You can't buy a Glock in Mass because of that. And this is looking to wipe that out.
Even a Kimber, high quality guns, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's crazy. Now, it's also important because a lot of people may not realize this was an old fight. These regulations were started by Scott Harshbarger, Attorney General back then, and then continued with Tom Riley and then subsequent Attorney Generals. When they launched these regulations, we actually did what's called a Freedom of Information Act request, which is not free, by the way. It cost Goal, I think, over a year and a half. It was a total of $20,000 to access the materials because they can charge reasonable research fees to give you these materials. And what we found was they tried for 6 years. Now, remember, this is consumer protection. This is not criminal activity. They tried for 6 years to find somebody that was harmed by a poorly manufactured handgun and couldn't do it. But they passed the regulations anyway. And after they did, I met with some of the staff over there and I said, why did you do this? You couldn't find a single person that was harmed by a poorly manufactured handgun, but yet you passed the regulations. And you got to believe this, Jared. The attorney from the AG's office across the table from me said, Well, yeah, but nobody's been hurt with 1 cent, so why would we undo them? Just you really didn't say that to me just then, did you?
It's
So
amazing.
it's kind of interesting. But the trick too that unfortunately the new Attorney General Maura Healey is using, I don't think she's ever complied with a FOIA request since she's been in office, because she started using there's an exemption in the law that if it's an ongoing investigation and divulging things may put either her people in danger or police in danger. So now anytime somebody does a FOIA request on her office, it's an ongoing investigation, so I'm not obliged to give you anything. When we did our initial one after she did the so-called assault weapons reban, that she told the press, we're going to comply. We're giving Gun Owners Action League a huge CD with 1,000 pages of documents, and we're not even going to charge them because out of the goodness of our hearts. So the media called me and said, well, she's complying. And I said, do you know what she gave us? She gave us 1,000 pages of online user manuals for guns that her staff had pulled and just put on a CD. So when she tells the staff, oh, no, I gave them 1,000 pages of documents. Yeah, you copied all the PDFs from gun owner manuals. That's all you gave us.
But for her, that's probably like some serious research there for her.
Yeah.
So a couple more good ones, and then we'll jump into what everybody wants. So there's some good stuff here. That there's some bills that in Massachusetts will allow you to carry your firearm on a snow vehicle or recreation vehicle or an ATV, which would be good. Just because it's a snow vehicle doesn't mean you don't have a Second Amendment. More stuff
that's a careful one, Jared, too, because people get hung up on that because it's not in the hunting laws, it's not in the gun laws, it's in the recreational vehicle laws.
Right.
So they got to be careful about that.
Yeah, and everything in that chapter and section is arrestable too.
And it also includes your own property.
Right.
So there's no exemption for being on your own property.
Let's see, another one for the 93A Consumer Protection. H2122, state preemption. No county or town can pass a law, ordinance, or regulation on gun ownership, use, transfer, etc. They can't be more strict than the current state law. This is, for those wondering what that means, what Pittsburgh just went through, how their city council and mayor said, I don't care about the state preemption and we're going to pass gun control illegally anyway, and our subjects will just deal with it. That's exactly what this bill is looking to stop.
Yeah, it's actually passed in several states throughout the country. Matter of fact, I believe it's Seattle, Washington, that Washington State passed it. And then the same thing, Seattle said, we don't care, we're going to start doing our own thing. But this is precisely to stop that from happening here, because what we have been seeing is that because they're losing pretty much on the federal and state level, they're trying to take it town to town to make it so difficult to be a gun owner. Imagine following 351 different rules and regulations and laws traveling through the state. It would make it impossible. And that's their goal, is to make it so impossible to be a gun owner and not get tangled up in the law that you'll just simply give up and turn your guns in. So if anybody believes that that's not the case, it is the case. They've said it. The other thing this bill does is to actually put in statute, and I think it's on the top of your next page, Jared, is to make sure that it's in statute. And you and I would say, well, this is a given, but the law doesn't look at it that way, that the right to keep and bear arms shall be pretty much presumed in any case that deals with firearms. And in Massachusetts, that is not the case. A lot of people don't realize that until Heller and McDonald, the Second Amendment did not exist in Massachusetts, and it barely exists now, because there was a Massachusetts Supreme Court case in 1976 of all years called Commonwealth v. Davis. You can look it up. And they said specifically that it is a right of the state, not of the right of the person. And since then, that's why even initially Goal couldn't take anything to court, because the court said you don't have that right.
Right.
So we're not going to recognize it, so you can't sue the state. And it made it very difficult.
Even though Article 17 doesn't say anything like that, right?
What? The Constitution again? No. Yeah.
A couple more the goodies, then we're getting into the meat and potatoes. Recreational vehicles again is on there. The CMP program. It's really difficult for those who don't know to get certain weapons on the CMP program. It's a civilian marksmanship program. In essence, it takes surplus firearms from the military, which we already paid for us as taxpayers, and they sell it back to the market. And it's difficult to do that in our state, especially for certain firearms like the 1911. And this would look to rectify that by statute, so that's a good thing. Also, 1369 would remove restrictions on non-citizens on possession and carry of self-defense spray. That one I highlighted because tell me more about that one, the non-citizen portion. Like, I don't know, tell me about why that would be something that we should back.
Well, it's kind of interesting because COM2A, along with the Second Amendment Foundation, I forget how many years ago now, they actually sued the state to kind of test the boundaries of the Second Amendment and licensing in Massachusetts. And what it was you could not get a temporary license to carry in Massachusetts if you weren't technically a citizen. You could be legally here, maybe, I don't know what they call it, a green card, or you're working here legally, you're paying your taxes, doing everything you're supposed to do. But because you weren't technically a citizen, you weren't allowed to get a license.
Right.
They actually sued successfully on that and said, if you're here legally, you should be able to exercise the rights of everybody. Some people have different points of view, but the purpose of the case was always to test the boundaries of where we are. So in this particular instance, it took us, 18 years to fix the pepper spray law, because before that, if you were a non-resident of Mass, you had to get a license to carry, which you just explained is $100 a year, and you have to get a license every year. If you were a resident, you had to get at least an FID card to carry pepper spray, which is ridiculous. So in 2014, along with a bunch of other stuff we did, we got rid of those laws. And basically what it says now is, as long as you're not a prohibited person, and there's a long list of all that garbage,
right,
you can carry a self-defense spray. In this case, this is Senator William Brownsberger. He actually represents Cambridge, but he's a very reasonable guy to talk to. I've had many great conversations with him, and he's just kind of a matter-of-fact kind of person. And he said, well, if you can get a license to carry, as a non-citizen, but you're legally here, why can't you just use something non-lethal like pepper spray? And again, it's one of those things that kind of tests the boundaries. So it's kind of interesting to watch that kind of stuff.
No, I was kind of leading you into it, and I'm glad you caught it. But yes, you can get an LTC here if you're not a natural-born citizen. There are ways to get that, and that's what this pepper spray portion is looking to do as well. I do want to take a second to point out and thank Malbanius. Thank you. He is trying to push everybody to help the channel here with the donations. I appreciate it. And with that said, there is a very large one here from BRS. It's a $100 super chat. Thank you. It's a message for you, Jim. He says, you're both true patriots protecting the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Thank you. That's Brett. He's a buddy of mine. He'll be at the hearing, he said. So I'm glad to see that he'll be there.
I'll be the one in the suit. I'm not in the suit now, obviously. I won't be wearing the hat, unfortunately. But,
Brett, thanks for stopping by, man. I appreciate it. Let's see, what else? 1417, which would be, well, we'll just put it out there as the Hearing Protection Act for Mass. Legalize suppressors, penalize possession of prohibited persons, or in use of crimes. I would love to see that happen here, but probably not on this watch, not with the current climate. That would be fantastic. It was going to pass nationwide. We had the co-sponsors, as you'll remember, for the federal bill, but then the baseball game shooting happened, and that canceled the vote. But yeah, I don't think that I'd love to see it happen, but not in this state.
Hey, Jared,
oppose. Yeah, go ahead.
Before we jump into the opposed stuff, if I can take a few minutes, one of the things that I really want to talk to people about just quickly is, we just went through a whole bunch of legislation that we're trying to put in, and even stuff that Goal has gotten passed before this legislative session. Sometimes we get not necessarily angry emails or contacts, but, why the heck did you do that? Why did you agree to this? One of the things that I try to do differently, especially in Massachusetts, is, number one, we're working behind enemy lines. So, I had one guy, oh, you're the great compromiser. I wish I had the power to compromise, but one of the things we try to do, which the other side is very good at, is to put things in place that will make a difference 10, 20, 50 years down the road. And to the average gun owner, it would mean nothing. But to us, in an overall strategy, even simple word changes in laws can make a huge difference when you walk into a courtroom. For instance, one of the things that we did in 14, which people didn't understand, was we started getting away from the word suitable when trying to get a license to using the term prohibited person. Now, to the average layman, that means nothing. Well, Jim, you didn't make any difference there. Yeah, we did, but it's laying foundation for later on. Because if we're forcing them, even though, we don't like licensing, we hate it, but we're dealing with it. If we're forcing them to determine things based on prohibited status rather than suitable status, that's huge down the road for things. So when you see us do things, it's not because we're giving in. It's because we're trying to seed things for later on down the line. Our opposition's been doing this for half a century. They think in terms of 50 to 100 years down the road. Our guys typically think of what happened yesterday. And
right.
We need to change that, and that's something Goal's been trying to. And we try to explain to our members and people on the way, but sometimes you don't have time to explain. You just need to do things. And that's one of the things that I actually speak at a college about advocacy. And, a lot of people say, well, it's easy. Stand outside the House or Senate chamber sometime, and when they come to you and say, Jim, this is what we're thinking of doing, yes or no. You don't have time to call people. You can't hold meetings. You can't get on social media. You got to make a decision right there. And all you can do is the best you can do, whether it's me or somebody else standing there. So,
I'm glad you said that. I'm guilty myself. I remember the day that the bump stock bill came through, was pushed through. I remember that, and I remember calling people who were in the chamber at that time, and I was extremely pissed that it was pushed through when it was snuck in. You know how it happened. It was it was a complete backdoor job, but I just sometimes it's tough to see the big picture, especially like when you said when people talk about compromises and stuff. I'm a no compromise guy. I think you know that. We've talked before. But it's tough when you're dealing with people who don't really care what you say, even though they're your elected officials. With the bump stock bill, Jared, maybe we should explain that too. When that initially passed the House, and I'll be honest, I told people, I said, you know what, whatever, bump stocks, whatever. I mean, we're barely hanging on to what we got, so bump stocks weren't a huge thing to me. And honestly, we did not have the clout to stop it. But we made substantial changes because what happened was, as you said, the House snuck it in. And people were basically saying, well, Goal really hasn't said one way or the other. But what the House passed was not a bump stock bill. What they snuck into a budget bill with almost 2 hours notice, literally, the words they used in that bill was the state government had regulatory authority over maintenance and enhancement of any gun you own. I saw that, and who thought that was okay? Dan Linsky.
Had to run to the Senate, and luckily we had enough friends left in the Senate to at least carve out that language. We couldn't stop the bump stock, but can you imagine if that House language was passed by the Senate and sent to the governor? What we wouldn't be arguing about bump stocks. You'd have to get Moore's permission to clean your gun, So
yeah,
so
David.
How bad it was.
David Linsky's his first name, right? David.
Linsky,
yeah. He's evil, guys. All right. So the ones that Goal is opposing, these are the ones you are seeing. I've done videos on them in numerous states across the country. No, Massachusetts shall never be any different than anybody trying to strip our rights. S1389, 1 gun a month, applies to the purchase of quote-unquote large capacity rifles, shotguns, and handguns only. So that leaves six shooters, pretty much, because every gun out there that can take a magazine is technically large capacity. What do you think that the chances of that?
I'll tell you a funny story on that one. This was back when Deval Patrick was in, and he had just gone to Arizona. Remember that it has nothing to do with the Second Amendment issue, but it was a border issue. When Arizona said, well, if the federal government aren't going to enforce these laws, we're going to start enforcing these laws as a state. And he was one of the governors that went down there and started rattling their cages and saying they're profiling people and all that kind of stuff. So when he came back, within 2 weeks, he had started pushing the one gun a month bill publicly. And the press came to me and says, well, what do you think about this? And I said, well, I think the whole idea is insane. But I said, the story here is the governor has had a huge policy decision change. He's had a change of heart for policy. And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, 2 weeks ago, he was in Arizona complaining about profiling. Now he's back in Massachusetts pushing a profiling bill against gun owners. So that bill died so quick once we started calling it a profiling bill. But it's been on their wish list for 20 years. It has shown no public safety interest. I think was it Maryland that had it, and they got rid of it because it was just such a joke. It's either Maryland or Virginia, I forget. But
it's part of the agenda, though. They want it.
Yep.
Thank you, Mighty Bastone, for the super chat. He says, thank you for all the effort and great info. Much appreciated, my friend. 1387 on the Senate side, firearm, ammo, and parts sales tax of 4.75%. A ban on the 50 BMG. Ban on, private sales must be done at dealers and impose a $25 limit on fees charged for transfer. Now, is this 4.75% on top of our 6.25, I would assume?
Yeah, and don't forget the 11% excise tax.
Right,
so we've been paying, 20%, do the math real quick, 20% tax on ammunition and parts. So, yeah, it's pretty sad. So, also, what I love here is they say private sales must be done at a retailer. Well, then it's not a private sale.
Right, then it's an outright sale.
Yeah.
When do we throw the tea in the harbor is what I'm guessing.
Yeah. We'll probably have the environmental police arresting us for some kind of contamination.
2040 ban imitation firearms, which would mean that basically all BB guns, pellet guns, and airsoft guns would be illegal, and all competition type air guns. Now,
yeah, this one originated from an incident, and I want to say Minnesota, a few years ago, where the police entered a house legally, and a young man pointed a BB gun, handgun at them, and unfortunately they, were fearing for their life, and they shot and killed him. It was a very isolated incident, but suddenly, then these bills started coming out all over the country about, well, we need to ban imitation guns. They all have to have orange on them so that police know they're not, real guns, which to me is a joke and to police is a joke because, I had a retired state trooper in the State House said, that means they're going to start spray painting all their illegal handguns with orange color, thinking we're going to, just not believe it's, well, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to assume everything is a real gun. But because of the requirements on this, it would virtually ban all of the competition style, the very expensive on-shoots pellet rifles, which are $2,000 and up. It would ban all of that stuff, all the junior programs. So it's pretty insidious bill.
They'll stop at nothing, man. They're throwing enough stuff at the wall, hoping something sticks. 2048 on the House side would allow self-adding to a no-gun list and allow others to place you on that list. Now, I want to get the term from the bill because it's laughable. It's the disavowal. You can disavow your own rights. You can give up your Second Amendment rights and be put on a list of people who can't think for themselves and let the government, let daddy think for you. And then you can have like doctors and psychiatrists say that this person's got some psychiatric disability. They can never have their Second Amendment. Whew. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I think it's red flag part 2. And basically what they're trying to do, and you can actually see this happening from the people out there who hate guns, despise us, lining up to put themselves on this disavowal list and holding disavowal parties. You talk about Orwellian. I'm not a tinfoil hat guy, but this is pretty serious stuff. When you have people lining up to tell the government, please take my rights away. The other thing is, and we talked about this before we went on air, the red flag pushers are really, there's a coordinated effort nationally to not connect mental health issues with these mass killings. And all of the people that are pushing the red flag laws are adamant about it. But if the red flag laws are about identifying the next mass killer and the next person who may be suicidal, how is that not a mental health issue? So now the same woman who got the red flag law passed in Mass now introduces a mental health bill where people can disavow their rights because they know they're sick. This stuff is really scary. I mean, a lot of people say, well, Jim, you're paranoid. Okay, what about this? So you can imagine a lot of this stuff just getting out of control.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I think, was it Washington was the state that first did that 2 years ago, allow people to give up their Second Amendment right for life. And then you'd have to go to a judge to try to petition to get your rights back. It's ridiculous. So we'll go through a couple more because I know your time is precious, and we've been going for about 50 minutes. 3843 on the House side would ban so-called ghost guns and require state approval to make a gun. So for those who might have the same passion I do for building certain items, they're going to try to make that illegal.
If I read that right, Jared, and I have to keep rereading it, it seems that you would, if you build your own gun, like you buy a frame, you buy a lower, whatever, it seems that you would actually have to have a federal manufacturer's license to do that. So good luck with that.
Yeah, especially in this state. So the next one's kind of funny. Require an annual affidavit from LTC and FID holders saying that there are no loss of stolen guns. You have to do that when you apply for your LTC anyway. So they want to do this on an annual basis. Just, it's busybody work. Who's going to do all this stuff? If this was to get enough support, are our reps going to be knocking on people's doors doing this stuff?
Yeah, I don't think so. And you know what? I don't think the police want to deal with it either. They got a lot of work to do. They don't need this garbage. This
is ridiculous stuff. So there's other stuff about suing gun owners for lost guns and stuff like that. A lot of the happy liberal stuff. 2077 would allow seizure of a vehicle used by someone who transports a firearm or a large capacity magazine, which everywhere in the world is known as a standard capacity magazine, if they have that illegally. So if you're giving a ride to somebody and they happen to have an 11th round, you could lose your car.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's almost like they're treating us like the old gangsters of old, right? So it's just, what are you going to do? You said it. They're throwing stuff at the wall just to make sure that everything's covered and basically scare everybody. But they're trying to make a name for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a little victory dance they can have. 3577 would establish a Firearm Violence Institute within the Department of Public Health. We should never trust them anyway. 2097 would bring that crazy microstamping thing from California here, and they're trying to limit 15 guns per year regarding sales on a limit by the retailer. So your gun shops could only sell 15 guns a year and somehow stay in business. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, maybe they'll be subsidized by the state, So, I mean, a lot of other industries are subsidized, so maybe they can sell their 15 guns in the first couple of days of the year, get subsidized for the rest part of the year, and just hang out, Maybe they can help Goal. They can have volunteer workshops at their gun shop. So,
gun shop food stamps.
Hey, there you go, right? So, that was like years ago. As a matter of fact, it's on this list too about mandatory insurance for gun owners. And I was actually debating Dave Linsky out on, I think we were in Springfield on a show, and he said, "Well, we mandate insurance for health insurance." And he goes, because, healthcare is a civil right. And I said, well, we'll have that discussion some other day. But I said, the only reason you have health insurance is to get good access to cheaper healthcare. Now, if you're going to guarantee our folks good access to high quality, cheaper guns, you might have us. Maybe we'll buy that insurance. I don't know. And he was just disgusted on that one. But sometimes
they haven't carried through anything, the government. When anything they put their hands in doesn't end up cheaper, and it definitely ends up costing us twice as much. 2095 looks to ban all large capacity magazines that aren't registered to a specific owner. So now we're going to have a registration for magazines, right?
Yeah, that's a magazine registry. That's exactly what that is. Yeah. So, and the only reason they do that is the same way that California did it. Just like they made people register their so-called assault weapons, and then they made them register their magazines. What follows registration? Confiscation.
Boating accidents. Oh, sorry.
Yes. Well, great white out on the Cape now, so
2093 is the liability you just spoke about for the insurance. 2092 looks to ban private sales. This is their silly loophole that they think exists. Ban all private sales. All sales and transfers must take place through an FFL and the $25 max fee again. So I'm sure you know many gun shop owners like I do. Their transfer fee is their bread and butter. The margins on firearms are very small if they want to stay competitive, and that's why you see the fluctuation in the transfer fee. So now the government is looking to tell people how much money they can make in their business.
Yeah. Well, it's supposedly a protection for the gun owners, but if you want to protect the gun owners, just get rid of all this stuff.
Yeah, this is creating a problem for gun owners.
Yeah, exactly.
2117, a smart gun task force. That is an oxymoron in and of itself. 3782 requires every firearm sold by a dealer to be sent to state police. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to comment on the smart gun stuff.
Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of people, they go round and round on this stuff. The easy answer to the so-called smart gun technology is, and I've said this when I've spoken in public, I've spoken in universities, you name it, when the Secret Service starts using this technology, then come talk to me. But there is not a protective entity in the country that wants anything to do with this technology because it can fail. How many people have you seen, who was it, Markey, that said, well, you can start up a smartphone in 5 seconds. Yeah, how many times has a smartphone failed you?
Yeah.
You're talking about life and death here. So when the president is protected by so-called smart gun technology, come talk to me about it.
Yeah, absolutely. When any of these politicians follow any of these laws, come talk to me. So the next one was requiring firearms sold by a dealer to be sent to the state police to be test fired, every firearm, photographed, and have a ballistics report made. And there's a second bill that was requiring that photograph to be done within the first 10 days. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine the logistics? I mean, set aside the civil rights, the logistics of that, where, especially when they find out, because I'm sure they don't realize, there's anywhere between 5 and 10 million guns, lawfully owned guns in the state of Massachusetts. That in itself will cause them to have a heart attack. But then trying to figure out how they're going to do the logistics of that is just insane.
That's the problem. They don't think. They just throw stuff down on paper. 10-day waiting period to purchase the gun, and then 1 gun a month. We've seen that already. There's a second bill right after that, 1 gun a month. Another ban on ghost guns, so you can see multiple attacks at the same items. Another liability. And then the last one is H3927, looking to make straw purchases illegal. Tell me more about that. I think that's already a federal law.
It's already a state law.
Right.
Matter of fact, it's chapter 140, chapter 269, section 12E, I believe is the law site. It's been in place for years and years and years. It's already there. As a matter of fact, goal in 2014, we were able to get in the only criminal language that was in that 2014 bill came from us. And it very specifically provides very harsh penalties for not just straw purchasing, but stealing guns and providing them to prohibited persons and so forth. So that's the other thing is some of the people writing these bills don't even realize what we have.
Now, have you had a chance to compare the current law with the proposed? Is it just a mimeograph, or are there any secret sauce that they want to sprinkle in?
No, it's actually weaker than what we already have. So it's useless. There'd be no reason to even debate it in the House. So there is a bill, and I was trying to find it. It's a Senate bill as to regards to gathering data, gun trace data. And I was actually asked by, and believe it or not, there's a couple of the moms that I do talk to. Some of them are rational, not all of them, but some of them are at least you can have a conversation with. And they were trying to get data on crime guns in Massachusetts. And because of some of the criminal laws that we have backed and passed, they asked me if I would take a look at it. I said, sure, I'll take a peek. And Senator Cynthia Stone Crean filed it. And what I did was I looked at it as, what are the things that we want to know as gun owners that we've been asking for years? Like, for instance, all right, we have all these gun laws. People are arrested. Okay, what happens to them? What happens when they're arrested? Do they actually get charged? Do they get prosecuted? So there's a whole lot of things that I looked at and said, you know what? If this was amended, I'd really like to know a lot of this stuff. But one of the problems that our folks don't even know, and the other side doesn't know, and I've educated them on it, is the term crime gun. And we have to be very careful if we're seeking data on that. Because what happens is any gun that's traced by the ATF is automatically labeled a crime gun. And somewhere, we don't really know, but somewhere between 50 and 75% of those guns were not traced as a result of the crime. Usually it's maybe an older person that passed away and the police come and get the guns because the widow doesn't want them. Well, what's the first thing they're going to do is trace them for ownership. But as soon as they trace them, they're automatically called a crime gun by the federal government. So it skews all the data. So there's a lot of things in that we would like to know, because back in January, I want to say you covered it, Jared, but I'm not sure. We put out a report on 20 years of gun control in Massachusetts.
Right, I did, yep.
States' own numbers and the federal government's own numbers to prove that not only is gun control not working, because they always say Massachusetts has the lowest gun death rates and therefore it's a success. It's really a hoax, because gun-related homicides drastically increased after they passed the 1998 law. And if you look at just violent crime, which is not necessarily gun crime, the federal government calls it rape, robbery, aggravated assault, and murder. Massachusetts, adjusted for population, because you have to do that when you're doing these stats, is actually the most violent state in Northeast America.
Shocking.
You have to go, yeah, imagine that, right? You have to go as far south to Maryland or west to Illinois to find a more violent state. So that includes New York and New Jersey. We are the most violent state. And shocker of shocks, Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire are the least violent states in the country when adjusted for population.
And they have what?
Constitutional carry.
Imagine that. No OK Corral shootouts there.
No. But anyway.
All right, so let's do one more. I've kept you past the hour. I know there's a lot of people here, not just in Mass, but across the country, because more and more gun control attacks on specifically ARs and AKs are using the language that was formulated here in 2016 in July. There's a case, Gola versus Maura Healey. Could you tell the people what the premise is, what the facts are, and an update on where it stands right now?
Sure. If you want to do an actual internet search, the name is Warman versus Healey, and there's like four of us, and Goal is one of them, but the official name is Warman.
Warman, yep.
So that case has gone. It started in the local federal district court, and our suit was not on how she did things. Our suit is based on the protection that the AR is just an average gun. It's a gun in common use. So we went that route rather than, because if we sued, a lot of people say, well, she did this illegally administratively. You know what? She just go back and do it the way she was supposed to do it and do it again, and then we'll be back in court. So we're trying to push. So it was our suit was denied in the federal court locally, district court. It was then denied at the federal appeals court. So now it is in the pipeline for the U.S. Supreme Court. They have not said yes or no whether they'll take the case yet. There's a couple of cases in the pipeline ahead of us, the New York case for one, and that's, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's the one where New York
coming up
City,
this month, October.
Yeah, right. If they have a license, they can't carry outside of the city. And then there's a New Jersey case. I'm trying to remember the name of the case, Rogers maybe, that's in the pipeline too, and that has to do with right to carry. So our case may be the third in line, and we'll find out in the fall whether they're going to accept our case or not, because as I said earlier in the show, they don't have to. They can just say no.
Right.
So we'll find out, and I'm sure it's going to be a bloodbath in the courts if they accept the case. So we'll have to see. And, also by then, who knows who's going to be in the court? Not to wish any ill will. I know people joke about it, but, I know Ruth is suffering from cancer, and I lost my mother to cancer, so don't joke about that stuff. So, but we have no idea who's going to be on that court in 6 months. Hopefully somebody good, but it's pretty sad when you have to root. And that's always one of my things, Jared. This is supposed to be a court that's, justice is blind. But our highest courts in the land haven't been that in probably 30 years.
Oh, yeah,
it's
easily.
Really sad when you have to vote for a president based on what you want a court to decide. And it never should have been that way, but unfortunately, that's where it's come.
Now, the Warman case, has that been distributed for conference yet? In this SCOTUS?
I don't think so. I think it's there, but I would imagine that's going to happen. I think in October, maybe.
Okay.
That's gonna happen, and then they'll come up with a decision on whether they're gonna see it or not.
All right. So here's a chance to give them the pitch. Drive them to the website. Get them to join.
Sure. It's www.goal.org. Everybody calls us Gold. It's so funny. No, we don't. We're not Gold. We're not the reserve. So it's gold.org. You can also, if you want to sign up we have a Friday email alert. You don't even have to be a member, at least for now. And you can just email staff@gold.org and you'd sign up for our Friday news. And the Friday news is not just politics. It also tells you what the clubs are doing that coming weekend and what's going on around the state, maybe some training stuff. And as always, whatever fundraisers we have that's going. So we can use all the help we can get. Occasionally, we also ask for volunteers, whether it's at a gun club or at a county fair somewhere where we can stay and talk to people. So, anything you can do to help us, we desperately appreciate it. We're a totally member-funded organization. We don't get anything from industry other than maybe an occasional donated gun that we raffle off. But everything else comes directly from our members and financial supporters. So we count on the $20, $30 donations, as well as, we get some big ones occasionally, and we thank them too, but not very often. So, like I said, we're a lean staff. We do what we do because we love what we do.
All right, excellent. Jim, thank you for your time, man. I appreciate it. I know you're a very busy man. I understand that your time is precious, so thanks for taking your time to talk to the people here who have been wanting this to happen for quite some time, so thank you.
Absolutely. And I just became a grandpa 3 weeks ago, so time is really precious.
Congratulations, my friend.
Right.
To everybody watching, thank you. I hope you have enjoyed this little session. If you want to see more of these, let me know. And if you definitely want to be kept in the loop with everything that's happening, Second Amendment news, whether it's good, bad, ugly, or indifferent in all four corners of the country, you need to subscribe to Guns and Gadgets. The family is growing. We're at 104,000 people now. Over 15 million views. So join us, help us grow. And the more we are on the same page, rowing the boat in the same direction, the stronger of a voice we have. So thank you all for your time. Until we see each other again, be safe, stay vigilant, and carry a weapon. Take care, everybody.